And good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Volk. I am the chair of the Center for the Inland Bays Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee. Welcome to our February meeting of our committee here. We're going to go ahead and do some rounds of introductions. So again, I'm with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, currently the interim director of cooperative extension here, but also our environmental quality extension specialist. So I'm going to go down our STAC member list and see who all we may have here. Right off the bat, I see our vice chair of the committee, Doug, is connecting to audio, so we'll get back to him in just a minute. So do we have Scott Andrews in the room with us yet? I don't think so. Leslie Baggett.
Hello, I'm here.
Thanks, Leslie. Can you remind us when everyone introduces themselves, what organization you're from?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Fine.
I'm with AKRF, a consulting firm that's, I'm in Hanover, Maryland, but we're kind of based out of New York.
Great, thank you so much. Mike Bott from Denmark. Mike. Chris Brosh from Department of Ag. No. John Clark, also Denmark. Kristen Kowaleski. I'm just going to look through and see if I see some of these names. Do we have Rob Gano? Aaron Givens? Ed Hale? Chris Hauser?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Chris Hauser. I'm the Associate Director at Delaware Sea Grant.
Thanks for joining us, Chris. I know you said you got some sick family members at home, so I appreciate you trying to Zoom in with us. Hey, do we have Zena Hentz?
Yes, good morning. Zena Hentz, DENREC, Division of Fish and Wildlife.
Great to see you. Ed Hale.
Yes, ma'am. Ed Hale with the University of Delaware School of Marine Science and Policy and Delaware Sea Grant.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Andrew Holmesy.
Thanks, Jen. Andrew Holmesy at the Water Resources Center at the University of Delaware.
Andrew. Doug.
Morning, Doug Janik, Cyber Consulting, Vice Chair of the STAC. Apologize for being late. I was kind of held up with the Fish and Wildlife meeting, and I just jumped in. And I'm going to probably step away for 5 minutes because I need to do a personal break. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks for being here.
Crazy morning. So
thanks for being with us, Doug. Let's see. Do we have Chris Main?
Yep, Christopher Main, DENREC Environmental Lab.
Morning, Chris. Holly Walker.
Sorry, can you guys hear me? I was having a minute trying to get it, and I have trees coming down in the background, so sorry about that. I'm Holly Walker. I'm from DENREC. I'm the Chesapeake Bay Program Coordinator.
Great, thanks for being here today. Do we have Ashley Norden?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am the Program Manager for the Delaware Coastal Management Program in DENREC.
Great. Banu Padel?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Banu Podel. I'm environmental scientist here at Watershed Assessment and Management Section, DENREC.
Great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Claire Simmers?
Hi, I'm Claire Simmers, and I'm chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Center for Inland Bays.
And you're our note taker today, correct?
And I am the note taker with a great help from Richard and anyone else who's taking notes.
Thank you for that. Richard, you're the next on the list.
Okay, I'm Richard Watson. I'm retired. I'm a volunteer for the CID.
Richard. Kelly Summers?
Morning. As soon as you call me, my camera stopped working. So, of course, but I'm going to get it back working. But Kelly Summers, EPA Region 3, STAC Liaison for the National Estuary Program Team. Good morning.
Great to see you. Let's see, do we have Lisa Wadener, Ed Ware yet? Is he on? So I thought, saw him, maybe not. Do we have Andrew Wozniak? I think he maybe said he had a conflict.
Andrew Wozniak, University of Delaware, School of Marine Science and Policy.
Thanks, Andrew. And do we have Molly Yacano?
I'm Molly Yakino, Research Coordinator with the Delaware National Estuarine Research Reserve and Delaware Coastal Management Program at DENREC.
Great. So those are our STAC members. If anyone else joined that maybe came on after I called your name, please, you can feel free to introduce yourself. Try to time it so that we're not overlapping with everybody. Or alternatively, you can do it too. Add your name to the chat along with your affiliation. So I'll pause right there. Anybody else who's on the STAC who wants to introduce themselves?
This is Michael Bott. I'm a program administrator with the Watershed Assessment Management section. So apparently I was on as my name was getting called, so I didn't want to interrupt earlier.
Oh, that happens to me all the time too. So thanks, Mike. Anybody else?
This is A.G. Robbins, Citizens Monitoring Program. I'm not on the STAC, but I just rushed in the door from Lewis. I didn't get the memo.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, we had to go virtual. Several folks just kind of dealing with potential viruses right now. We didn't want to expose anybody else.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah. Better way to stay healthy.
Ashley Tabibian with DENREC.
Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Jen. I RSVP'd that I wouldn't be here, but COVID had other plans for me. So I work for DENREC, Division of Watershed. I'm an environmental scientist with the Shellfish and Recreational Water Programs.
Great. We're glad to have you here today. Thank you. Other individuals who are just here attending, we're open and welcome to everyone here. Anybody want to introduce themselves?
Mark Casey, President, Delaware Aquaculture Association, representing the oyster farmers.
Hi, Mark. Nice to see you.
Hi, I'm Angela Padaletti. I'm Region 3 EPA Coordinator for the Center for the Inland Bays, one of many. And I'm also one of those people with the virus thing. So I'm going to go off camera so you don't see me being all sick and things. But thanks for having me here.
Well, thanks for toughening up and listening in.
Hi, I'm Mark Nardi. I'm with USGS, Maryland, Delaware, DC Water Science Center.
Thanks, Mark.
And Christophe Toulouse, Executive Director of the Center. It's great to have everybody here. Thank you all for joining.
Steve Williams, DENREC, Director, Division of Watershed Stewardship.
Hi, Steve. All right, well, if you have not introduced yourselves and you'd prefer to introduce yourself in the chat, please do so. We do have, like we said, Claire's keeping a record. We do like to have a full listing of the folks who are attending and to have some sense of who you're affiliated with, if you're with an organization or just an interested member of the public. So thanks everyone for doing that. I'm seeing that happen in the chat right now. So I'm going to go ahead and move on down our list. Next up, we have some announcements from the center. We have Megan Noe Fellows listed as the one who's doing this. I did speak to her briefly this morning and I heard her clearly, but she's one of the folks who's got, possibly a laryngitis going on and voice coming in and out. So Megan, are you able to provide any updates or should we turn that over to Anna?
Hi, good morning. As long as I'm not coughing or choking, I will continue to try to speak. Thank you all for switching over to the virtual. Sorry, AG, about not getting you the memo. But we have some staffing announcements. So I'd like to introduce you to Morgan Krell. He is our new science technician. And maybe he can say a few words.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I'm just getting back to the office from the field. My name is Morgan. I'm the new science technician here at the center. So if anyone knew Zach Garmo previously, I'm filling in as the new person in his role. And I'm also taking over some of Andrew's old projects. So shellfish restoration, eelways, submerged gravel wetlands, and what else is on the top of my head. Those are some of the major projects, I guess. I'm also going to be helping with the water quality, the fish surveys, and just all the stuff that goes on as part of the volunteer surveys as well. I am a graduate of Purdue, and I got a degree in aquatic sciences. And a lot of my background is in fish science. And so I'm really excited to be working more on habitat and yeah, just new to Delaware and new to the area. So thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. And with him coming on board as our science technician, Taylor was promoted to our science coordinator. So you met her at the last meeting, and she actually drew the short straw today. So she was the one that met AG, hopefully at the Lewis campus, to send everybody in the right direction. And then also, you may have noticed we are recruiting currently for a data scientist. This person will come on board to help us out with some GIS questions ahead of State of the Bays 26. More on that a little bit later, as well as a grant that the center received to understand what kind of nature-based solutions might be appropriate in the inland bays, especially to build community resilience in our EJ communities, Oak Orchard, and more western side of the watershed. So we're hoping to have them on board ahead of the next STAC meeting. So maybe we can have a hat trick. So that was the announcements. Did anybody else have any staffing? Okay.
Great, thanks, Megan. If you're able to continue on, can you provide us a brief update of the environmental monitoring plan?
Yes, so we submitted the environmental monitoring plan for board approval in September, which it was. And so then it got forwarded to EPA. Unfortunately, our EPA representative, Ferry, he was too good at his job. He got promoted. And so Angela, who's on right now, is helping us get it through the final EPA approval process. So we hope to see that in a couple of weeks. Thank you. Doug has his hand up.
Yes, Doug.
Yes, I just want to say that we are hiring. I am looking for essentially an assistant. I've been told I'm doing too much. I need to start training other people to help me out. So that was advertised last week. So just go to our website, and if you're interested or know anybody who may be interested, it's a mid-level position. Please send in, but it's all about restoration.
Doug, could you maybe drop the link in the chat?
Okay, I'll try to find
it. Give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Hold on. Okay, let's just keep going.
Yep. And so, Megan, you were still on the list with any updates on the hydrodynamic model development. I don't think you would have a lot to share if there is anything.
I don't. I'm sorry. I'm still at the 90% RFP for all of the STAC members that are helping out with that. It just got deprioritized in the staffing and the holidays, but I hope to take another look at that this quarter.
Very good. We'll touch base on that between now and the next meeting, and I think we're still not behind on the schedule, but we need to probably start making some progress on that to maintain the schedule that's been identified in the previous work plans.
That is correct.
Mark Nardi, I know you're here and you had been chairing the WIN committee. I know that group had provided their basically report, their summary to the center, which was shared with the board. Is there anything else to share or update on that? Or Christoph, perhaps you're the most appropriate one since it's kind of landed in your lap at this point.
Agreed. Christoph is the most appropriate one.
Well done, Mark. Good handoff.
You're a good receiver. I mean, you should be in the NFL.
Well, it's a first of all, a big thank you to the subcommittee that helped pull together a good analysis of the draft environmental impact statement that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management at the Department of the Interior circulated, essentially on behalf of U.S. Wind, which is the developer that's working on the Maryland offshore wind project. We incorporated those recommendations into a set of comments that we did submit, and I believe those have been circulated to all the members of the STAC. If for some reason we did not get those to you, then please let us know, and we'll certainly share those with you. Part of the public comment process, when I submitted those comments on behalf of the STAC committee and the rest of us here at the center, there were about 1,000 comments in the queue. So I suspect that BOEM has gotten plenty of feedback. And of course, as everybody knows, there's sort of the offshore component of the project, which was not our bailiwick. There is an onshore component that's looking westward from the shoreline, which is ours. And unfortunately, they're proposing to put the onshoring power cables right through our Indian River Bay. And I say unfortunately because it required the staff to take a look at this and to evaluate what the potential impacts might be, and to assess the draft EIS for the robustness of its analysis of data, use of modeling, and other tools to give us all the rationale for going through the bay as their preferred alternative for bringing that power onshore. Bottom line, based on the STAC analysis, we found that frankly, US Wind hadn't done their homework, had not done the job, relied on incomplete data and dated modeling. They could do better. And so our recommendation is that, as BOEM considers the EIS comments and considers issuing a permit, which they are expecting to make a decision by the end of this calendar year, that they do a better job of that, or in the alternative, consider an alternate route for bringing those cables on shore, which would involve a land route from their entry just south of the Indian River Inlet along the coastal highway to Route 24 and over to Dagsboro, that way where the power plant is and where the interconnection with the grid is located. So that was our feedback. As you all know, there's a larger context at work here. And so the coastal communities are considering a benefits package that was offered to them by US Wind. I think across the board, the towns have either rejected it, as Fenwick Island did, or are deferring a final decision until we know more about how BOEM responds to the EIS and makes its permitting decision. So at any rate, it's a never-ending set of interest, concerns, in some cases, questionable information. And so we will continue to do our part to make sure that people have the best information available to them, particularly as it relates to the impact of the wind project on the bay side. So that's the update. If there are any questions, I'm happy to respond.
I'll just say thank you, first of all, to Christoph for wanting to convene this subcommittee and take the time, let that group come together and really assess what the potential impacts might be and really want to know that in order to make an informed comment to the company. And so thank you, Mark, for chairing that group and bringing all of the members of it together and really being able to work very effectively and efficiently to do that in a timely manner. So I think it was a great effort. So Christoph, at this point, the committee is just basically paused at the moment. If we need to bring them back at a future date, we may need to reconvene them, but they've done what we asked them to do. And so we would expect further updates from them. We'll just be waiting to see how, like you just shared, BOEM response and kind of impacts assessment report they provide.
Oh.
Are there any questions? I saw, I think Kelly was clapping her hands. Any questions for Christoph? Okay, thank you for that update. Brianna, you're next on the list. Are you able to share with us any updates on the habitat plan? And I think there are some, or at least updates coming up.
Yeah, good morning. So as far as the habitat plan is going, in the beginning of December, we had our second stakeholder work session, and a big thanks to all of you who were able to join in on that. We looked at the drafted goals and objectives together, in addition to a few different maps and deliverables. Since December, Michelle and I have met with a few folks from the EPA to make sure we are still on track with everything. And we took a high-level look at those goals and objectives to make sure signatories were going to be aligned right, and all the timeframes and actions are looking okay. The plan is still running smoothly according to the timeline, and a big thanks to DNREC for working with us so diligently on species data. We just received the agreement to gather all the species data that they have, so that's a big win for us in the timeline. We are currently working on finalizing the goals and preparing to send those to our signatories for review. The next stakeholder work session, which you will all be invited to, will be in May. So be on the lookout for that.
7 o'clock, you said?
Great, thank you. Give me 1 second. I'm going to mute Doug because I think he's had to step away. Are there questions for Lydia? Not Lydia. I'm looking at Lydia. Questions for Brianna. All right. Thank you for that update. And be on the lookout for those calendar invites for upcoming sessions. This next item on the agenda about joint partnership for Delaware Estuary and Maryland Coastal Bay STAC sessions in 2024. If you all recall, going back several months now, we've started to talk about the possibility of bringing together the STACs of both PDE and our STAC. And then we started discussing with the Maryland Coastal Bays as well. Originally, we were thinking, well, maybe we would have this February meeting coincide with the wetlands conference that DNREC just hosted this week. After some investigation, we determined that wasn't really feasible for us to do that. And that might have been a lot for those of you who I know were really there and in force at the wetlands conference this week anyway. But we did want to really still explore this a little bit more. And so I know the center staff have been hearing from EPA that they would really like all of the centers to really connect more with the other estuary programs in the region and maybe look for collaborative opportunities. I know Doug and Megan had attended the Maryland Coastal Bays STAC meeting recently and found that to be very informative. And I think Megan was having a meeting or has had a meeting recently with staff from the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. So Doug, and I might call on you if you want to chime in anymore. We want to have this type of collaboration. I want to know what the folks who are on the committee and those interested would see as benefits of maybe joining other groups, STACs, to listen into their meetings, having something more jointly together. I think what we at least landed on is that we at least want to have the chairs and the coordinators or directors of the science programs at those 3 programs to at least get together on an annual basis. And so that's something we haven't yet scheduled, but could and should be doing in the near future. So Doug, what else would you like to share?
Oh, the main thing here is that, there's so much overlap between estuary programs, but everybody's doing things a little bit differently. And there's such a great opportunity to do technical transfer of information. Why recreate the wheel if someone next door is doing something similar and is at a different level? I mean, whether it be an outreach, a restoration effort, just so much that we have in common, and we're just. And this has been forever. I've been working with STACs for 15, 20 years now, and basically it's just a matter of we just don't talk enough, and I think that's short-sighted, quite frankly. And I think we can help each other. And that's what it comes down to. Why not maximum, we do so good individually. Why can't we do better cumulatively? I guess that's the whole next of this.
Thanks, Doug. Kelly, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I figured I should chime in on this. So I'm the STAC liaison for all the Region 3 National Estuary programs. We technically have 4, but we share Delaware Estuary with Region 2, and we share the Albemarle Pamlico with Region 4. I would say there would be some benefit because each STAC has a different responsibility for the most part, like what we take on. The CIB, our STAC is really involved in the monitoring work, doing the updates every 2 years. In the Delaware Estuary, the STAC is really involved in planning the Science Summit. And then in the Maryland Coastal Bays, we've done a lot of work with the climate resilience work. But the one thing we do have in common between all three is there's a lot of work with the state of the bays, or the in the Delaware, they call it the technical report for the estuary and basin and the TREB. But all three stacks do get a lot of requests to weigh in on the various state of the bays, state of the estuary. So there might be some opportunities to kind of learn the different approaches that each stack take, and then how we can optimize how we receive information, how we are requested for information, and how we provide that feedback. That's just one thing I've noticed that all three programs request of the stacks. And I will stop there.
No, that's really a great observation. I like that. So learn the different approaches and basically optimize. Christoph, your name is up next. Oh, can we let Christoph go first?
Sure.
Oh, you're muted though.
Apologies for that. Gee whiz. So based on Kelly's presentation, and quick question, I'm wondering how much a common interest in climate resilience and climate impacts generally might create an opportunity, aside from sort of the beams part of what the stacks are doing, is technology sharing, information sharing, knowledge sharing, in some aspects of that, where we're all struggling to figure out where the capacity is going to lie to keep our estuaries from, going under. So in one of the areas I'd just like to throw out as a possibility is collaborating maybe on the behavioral science side of things. We've got robust science. I think climate science is struggling still with maybe some of the resolution issues, but the progress of the last several decades has been pretty extraordinary. So I think where our real challenge is selling that story and helping our communities to understand what the nature of the challenges are, but more importantly, how they might be a part of the solution working with us. And so I think that may be an opportunity, certainly because our regional issues are so similar. The national estuary programs at EPA and through ANEP, which is the state programs, struggling, with this technology transfer issue. And I think we could certainly stand ourselves up as a model for how to do this if perhaps we pick one particular theme and really dive into it, whatever that consensus might be.
Yeah, Christoph, I just love to react to that. So obviously climate change is one of the priorities for the EPA right now. And I have actually, in the trash-free waters, microplastic, plastic pollution world, there's a big community of practice around community-based social marketing. How do we get people to change their behaviors behind those practices? So I've taken a couple really cool trainings from a guy that really leads that effort. And of course, Dr. Doug, oh God, it's gonna blow my mind that I can't remember him, but perhaps there might be some opportunity there to have a joint stack meeting where there's some training on behavioral science, where then we could almost be like a train the trainer sort of thing. Like as the science community, we would have the knowledge of that social science behavior. I'm sure there's climate change work in behavioral science. I just haven't been tapped into it. And I can certainly reach out to our lead for climate change in the water division and see if he has any recommendations or any training. And maybe that's something I can bring to a joint stack meeting. So I'll put that on my to-do list and see if there's anything. Angela and I can work together on it. So we can commit to at least looking around to see if there's any folks out there, if that's something that would be of interest.
I think that's a great thing, Kelly. Thank you for looking into that, and Angela too. And I'll just share, we do have the Center for Behavioral and Economic, it's CBEAR research. So here it's in my college. And one of the faculty members who heads up that center, Dr. Leah Palm-Forrester, has just submitted a pretty large NSF grant with, I think it's Rhode Island and South Carolina. And it has a behavioral economics piece in that, where they're really looking at community willingness to maybe relocate. So dealing with sea level rise and sort of buyout programs. And so I think Rhode Island's maybe a little bit further ahead than where Delaware and South Carolina are. And so kind of really trying to learn from those three states, which are obviously not the neighboring programs we're talking about now, but there are people working in different aspects and niche areas there. So Doug, did you want to add?
Yeah, and just real quick, with stacks, I always had this, and we've talked about it many times, Jim, quietly, is that, our job is to support the estuary program we're associated with. And sometimes stacks kind of build a kind of like their own, just kind of develop their own thing. But the core is we want to support the estuary programs. And one thing I'm acutely sensitive to, it's not just with the stacks on one, but also with environmental field in general, there's been a huge turnover. So, we had a luxury for many years that someone from DP with CIB, they all knew each other. We have a huge volume of new staff coming on board at all the estuary programs. They don't know each other. There's no, they can't call someone up in a different estuary program, ask questions. They can say, I have a shellfish question. This is a selfish person at the next estuary program. I think a real good service we could do cumulatively at this meeting is to create a contact list by discipline. So if someone has a question, they can call another expert in the field and help each other without us being involved. We can set up a framework for them. So, we can do a little effort as a stack, which is going to benefit all the estuary programs because they'll have this contact list for certain disciplines. I thought that'd be really, really helpful for the new generation coming into these estuary programs.
That seems like a low-hanging deliverable that we could accomplish.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Andrew.
Doug, I definitely agree with that. And I think reaching out particularly to the Maryland Inland Bays, because if you look at the map, it stops at Delaware and starts at Maryland, and it's the same water, it's the same land. And so I think there's probably I'm sure some of us know, we've worked with them some, but not a lot. So to kind of bring the Maryland Bays and look at it as one system as opposed to kind of a the hard line at the state. And I know that the center kind of sometimes little ass woman is a little forgotten. I don't want to say it's not focused on, but it's sort of out of sight, out of mind, kind of Maryland's issue, especially the top of Assawoman. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I know that the center, just having represented the STAC on the board, has had representatives from Maryland Coastal Bays attend board meetings maybe about once a year or at least every 18 months or so. So I know there's communication happening, but I do like how you're talking about looking at it as one system. Megan, what can you add to this conversation?
And yes, along those lines, Maryland Coastal Bays and CIB have recently been partners on a big NOAA grant. So we are definitely looking for ways to increase what we know is just a jurisdictional boundary and erase those lines. So it's certainly recognized, but we need to find the right project to work together.
Yeah, I was just talking about just myself. I know there's been some turnover lately, and I just not plugged in down there, and maybe because I'm in northern Delaware, but
I think it's happening everywhere, Andrew. There's been retirements and people who move on to other positions, and then for several years we're all locked up in COVID, and now I think I'm hearing that from multiple groups that I work with. It's just people just don't know each other anymore. Yeah. I think we're back and we're trying to work and not having the contacts we used to have. We're new and never had them. So I think this has been helpful. So I definitely hear support and specific ideas of how we can work together and why we would work together. So I think this is something that Doug and Megan and Christoph and we will all work on coming together and starting to get this ball rolling, and we will have more to share. And if we have anything before our next STAC meeting in April, certainly look for emails from us on this, at least opportunities if anybody else is interested in attending some of these other STAC meetings in other states. So I'll move on at this point. Doug, you are listed as the next presenter for the Inland Bays dredging, and you may need to back up and give some.
I'm going to back up. I'm going to tell
a little while since we talked about it.
Yeah, this all started. I do a lot of work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife in multiple states. So, and with the regional personnel. So we're looking at a more of a landscape perspective. And one of these, and also I'm also working with the University of Delaware, with Ed Hale is aware of. And that's actually what got this started. I don't know if you realize is that, and I was asked to help the University of Delaware with a big shoreline project in the Lewis area. And in doing that, I start looking around the big picture with the marshes and the drainage. It's what I normally do when I get involved in something like this. And I saw some, rocks or, maybe moderate hanging fruit. So I talked to my Deers Fish and Wildlife contacts. I said, this is an area that we can maybe do something with, in the near future. And then he goes, he agreed. So he made calls out to DENREC and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And we kind of have an impromptu committee or group that's starting to meet almost monthly now. And what's happening is that we're looking at, within Delaware, all the dredging projects coming up in the next 0 to 5 years. And working with the Fish and Wildlife, they're looking for areas where they can have beneficial reuse, at least on federal projects. And also we're starting to talk to other nonprofits have land holdings with it, and also we're pulling in maybe it's like TNC. We might be, and sometimes we may talk to Delaware Wildlands. We haven't done it yet, but the idea is that we're looking to find beneficial reuses for every dredging project that comes up in Delaware. We're just starting to have these conversations. And Derek's very invested in, the Corps is very invested because that's part of their mission right now. And I don't have a lot to report other than the fact it's starting up. Everybody's a willing participant to talk this through. And all I was gonna say is some of the areas, the new projects coming up is they're actively dredging the basically the Lewis River Canal. The first phase, not much to do with because we're after the fact. But the lower portion of the canal is something that's being discussed. Little creeks being discussed farther north, because outside of this estuary program. But the point being is that we're looking for beneficial reuses. We'll be talking about this, and also we're going to be seeking grants. So now we know these are happening. We have time to get grant money to subsidize the dredging project to allow for the reuse project to piggyback on top of it. So this is a very proactive initiative. It's just starting up. I don't have a whole lot to say with it, and I'm not sure if all the parties want me to say a lot, other than the fact it's happening, and so I'll basically, in the future, I'll be talking to them saying, hey, let them know what my position on this committee is, and basically make sure that everybody's comfortable with sharing information. But right now, I think everybody's fine with the fact that there is a group talking among agencies to try to maximize beneficial use throughout the state of Delaware. So.
Thanks, Doug. Christoph.
Yeah, just quickly, is there any prospect for looking through that context or others at actually not necessarily just beneficial reuse, because that's great and wonderful when you have a dredging project, but I think we're going to have restoration projects where we actually need to have the material. And there may be no dredging project, but we may be looking for material that might be helpful for marsh restoration and other purposes. And I'm just curious, whether are we stuck with the dynamic of only being able to take advantage of these materials when they're a byproduct of navigation or other dredging projects, or can we start to be looking at these materials as a resource and looking for where their availability is? It's the analog to what we do with offshore sand resources when we need to do a beach restoration, for example.
Yes. Right now, everybody's looking at sediment as a commodity at this point. It's it has value as on many levels, and and for me, I'm looking at basically there's a lot of spoil cells that have a lot of material that's just sitting there, and it'd be great to reuse that material as well. Or so I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is something that is involving a lot of entities who have common needs and uses and desires. But the whole idea of, any way we can reuse material or reestablish habitat, it's on the board, right? In my perspective. And also these are the same people, a lot of the same people that can talk about other things such as what you mentioned here. So again, this is something where this is one avenue for the goal, for restoration that I think that needs to be talked about, and it is being talked about right now, and everybody's coming together. So this is like connecting dots early on, proactive, and not after the fact. and we can bring in other aspects. The same players that are in these calls are also the same players that for these other items that you talked about are the same players, basically. At least some of them are. So everything's on board, as far as I'm concerned. I'm kind of a cog in the wheel right now. I help bring it together, but I'm not the decision maker on this. I'm a technical resource, to help out with the stuff and to help, for instance, if there's something that's going on down within your footprint, with the CIB's footprint, I'm a link. I can help facilitate that. So that's kind of what my role on this team. I'm not the state, I'm not the Corps, I'm not Fish and Wildlife, but I am a technical resource who has that familiarity and relationships to help things work. That's my role in that committee at this point.
Thanks, Doug. So you mentioned getting together to apply for grants. Would the grants be from some of those groups that you've just mentioned or outside entities?
It's the same, it could be anything from a NIFRF grant to a, if you go a little farther, just north of Lewis, it can be the Delaware River Basin grants, it can be NOAA grants, it's really whatever's coming out there. I mean, right now, it's like a machine gun, it's rapid fire. As soon as you get one done, there's no one's looming. We have to jump right on. I mean, it's just the next 3 months is nothing but grant running, it seems like. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, but so much work. And I'm, and for me, I'm doing everything from Maryland up to New York. So it's been insane, absolutely insane right now. There's so much happening right now, everywhere. So
hopefully you have a grant writer who can help you.
Well,
we need
it's a team effort. Grant, these type of grants are team efforts. We help with costing, we help with technical write-ups. We have these meetings. It's such a bigger thing than it used to be. It used to be you get 1 or 2 people, we'll sit down, we figure it out. It's not like we're, everything from, they say we do a WIAC grant, a state grant. That's something that we can do where, I'll work with, say, with CIB together, and we'll put together a real nice grant and would be successful. When you get to these federal grants, it's a whole different beast. It's a whole different beast. So it's been just monopolizing my life the last few months.
Are there any other questions or comments for Doug? So it sounds like more to come. There's a group of people from different organizations
So much
getting together,
potential,
talking about this.
Yes, the whole idea is I'm trying to get the right people in line talking for so many things right now because there's so much potential and so much upsides over the next couple of years.
All right.
I'll just add, I think because it's apropos from the previous conversation, is the Maryland Coastal Bays program is working on a sediment management plan, and they are having similar discussions about dredging for and then getting that material for restoration. I know a lot of their focus is on artificial islands for bird colonies. So they're having similar conversations and are actually working on a pen to paper plan. So there might be some conversations among the different national estuary programs if there's interest in restoration and those material management in the inland bays. The coastal bays have done some legwork, and they've had a couple meetings, and they actually have a couple subcommittees that were meeting yesterday and the upcoming weeks about permitting and design. So perhaps if the inland bays program isn't engaged in those subcommittees yet, you might want to consider having some representation there on their subcommittees for like enhanced communication.
That's helpful.
Kelly, I would love to help out with that, but I know the crew down there, and we are crossing paths kind of like just fringely, but if they need any help, I'd be more happy. I have a lot of familiarity with Bird Island stuff, everything from the Gulf, mostly from the Gulf, but that's where all this stuff really started from a number of years ago.
Yeah, Doug, I can forward you the emails that I've received that have some of the subcommittee meeting times, and it's being I think their contractor is with the NWF that's like leading a lot of that effort. So I'm certainly happy to send it to Jen and Doug, and you guys can distribute as you see.
Great.
Thanks, Kelly.
This is fun stuff.
this was a great round of updates of old business. And so I thank everyone for the information that they've shared and the good conversation we've had so far. At this point, we're going to go ahead and now move forward and transition into some new business. And the first item on our agenda is a presentation by Lydia Franks, who I believe, Lydia, you're a graduate student with the University of Delaware, correct?
Yeah, I'm a second-year master's student. Thanks.
Wonderful. So when I was in grad school, I presented to this committee myself quite a few times. So it's a great opportunity to come share your planned work and your preliminary findings and then final findings. So I know you're on the docket to talk to us about shoreline of the inland
Yeah,
bays.
and thank you so much for, inviting me to this. This is really good experience for me. And I know I met a couple of you at the Wetlands Conference this week. It was great. But if I didn't meet you, again, hi. And Andrew's going to help present as well. So Andrew's actually going to kick us off.
Yeah, I have the PowerPoint. So I don't, can I
You
go
should
ahead
be
and
able to
share
share
my
your
screen?
screen.
As
Yep.
we're going to tag team this a little bit. Most of it's coming from, obviously Lydia did the heavy lifting, and we worked with Andrew McGowan previously, and now Megan we're working with closely. So
Wonderful. Go right
let's
ahead.
see. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. It's still in, it's not, yeah, there you go. I was
Oh,
gonna say it's
is
not in
that-
presentation mode yet.
Is it now?
No, it might be on a different screen for you. We're still seeing,
There we go.
there we go. Yep.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. This is a project that we started, I think, late 2022, and it was came about through the Inland Bays reaching out to us. I think Andrew, we had shared information that we have funding for students, mostly undergraduate interns, but a couple of graduate students as well. So that's where this came about. A little background, this is not exactly new business, I guess. It's taking a look at the project that was performed by the VIMS, Virginia Institute of Marine Science. I haven't seen the 2006 report. I have seen the 2012 report, but apparently they did some work before. And so this was extending and kind of refining, and maybe from our point of view, kind of making it more useful directly to the center, or trying to figure out how to take what they had done, extend it, and then make it useful for the center's needs now. This was funded through our program, the DWRC's program under the NIWAR, National Institutes for Water Resources grant through the USGS. So it's great that we were able to cover some of Lydia's time. And the stated purpose is really supporting the Living Shorelines Initiative, or Living Shoreline Initiative, that the Inland Bays has around the bays. So how to make this fit there is kind of our next step, and maybe something we'll be reaching out to STAC sort of at the end of this, and thinking closely with Megan about how this is going to, how it can be applied to the current needs of the CCMP, of the living shorelines. And so we started with Andrew, and now Megan is helping guide this, and Lydia is the graduate student being supported by us for this purpose. We're not really replicating the VIMS effort. If you read the report, I was actually not familiar with the report. I probably had heard about it, but I wasn't closely following it. So if you are, hopefully you'll have some comments on how their findings might be used with this or not used with this. We focused more on the condition of the shoreline. They inventoried a lot of structures, and as well as land use and that sort of thing. But we wanted to focus on the condition, and this was going back and forth with Andrew more than a year ago about exactly what we wanted to do, exactly what was actually feasible from what we had. This is a quick cover view of the VIM study. It was a very detailed assessment. It was a very a lot of effort went in, boat-based assessment. I think I don't know how much of the shoreline they perused, but they cruised around in a whaler and did videography. They inventoried the shoreline structures. They they basically, I think visually could see inland, and they characterized the land use from what they could see, and also measured the elevation, I think using the videography, because they took a video of the whole shoreline. So we sort of took that as our starting point and went back and forth early on with Andrew, and decided that we were less interested for this project in the function, like a wharf or a marina, and we were more interested in the condition. So what is actually physically there in terms of, as it relates to resilience, as the ability of the marsh, say, to move inland, or whether there's, a shoreline hardening. So we reduced the number of categories. We made them all focus on the condition as opposed to function. And then we added Little Assateague Bay, which hadn't been part of that, at least part of the 2012 study. And anybody that's familiar with or aware of those studies might be able to add some nice context to that. So we used the 2012 aerial photography, and then we extended it to 2022 to get a kind of a change analysis from one year to the next, which was the main focus of Lydia's efforts, was, detailed photogrammetric analysis, which meant looking at lots and lots of screen time looking at photos. It's not an assessment of the loss. We've done that before, working through, and Kelly remembers this, the RARE grant, looking at shoreline loss and changes. This is really more just looking at the characteristic change of the shoreline, whether it's hardening, whether, how is it changing. We didn't look at upland land use. We did talk about that early on, but we're not assessing that. That's been done. We've done it, and it's been done for, the State of the Bays reports, etc. And we weren't really inventorying structures. We found that they didn't inventory every single structure, so it was a little unclear, like, if they looked at every structure, do you want a point or an indicator where every single pier is? And that's would be quite a challenge, because there's so many, and it's not fundamentally a field-based approach. There might be some later where we go out and field verify, kind of take a look at what's going on. Obviously, staff, Megan and others know the ground very well, so that might be part of it later. So currently we've extended the analysis to 2022. We've completed all the bays except Rehoboth. It's mostly completed, but we're not presenting that, just because we wanted to make sure it was complete before we, compiled the statistics or presented anything. We are working with Megan to develop a accuracy assessment. We just want to find out, how well we're doing. And then, sort of for me anyway, my idea is to use the STAC is to be able to gain feedback on how this can be used. So we want to make sure that whatever we're producing is going to be useful to the inland bays and beyond, to guide resilience, talks on resilience, on the shoreline initiative, etc., the Living Shoreline Initiative. So I think I'm moving, but yeah, sorry, Lydia, this is Lydia's slide, and I'll go ahead and advance them. I'll try to.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to start talking about the methods, since this is kind of where I spent most of my time. So between mostly when we were working with Andrew McGowan, we were developing procedures and guidelines on how we wanted to proceed with this. So our first step was to, like I just said, develop these new procedures, to focus on what we're interested in, which is the composition of the shoreline rather really than the structure and the function, and establish new categories rather than using the ones that VIMS had already established. So the second step was to go into the 2012 aerial imagery and the previous assessment that VIMS had done, and use these to kind of recategorize the shoreline into what we're interested in. So what we did was we went back and re-altered the 2012s to kind of match our interests. And then the third step was going into the 2022s and just updating that using those same categories. Moving into step 4, we ended up grouping the shorelines into smaller categories for summary statistics purposes. So we took 9 categories and grouped them down into 4 just to simplify things. And then our last step is we're working on, as Andrew said, kind of coming up with a quality assurance system to make sure that we are accurately identifying the shoreline. So this is our kind of a summary of our procedures and guidelines that we came up with. And this isn't all of it, it's just the big points. So we really wanted to try to keep the original polylines, the original delineations that VIMS had put in there, unless it was excessively poor, essentially. If there's an area that just, wasn't making sense, it didn't look like the shoreline followed that, for whatever reason, that could have changed. Our second step was, like I said before, focusing on the composition of the shoreline rather than what its function is. So you might have a structure that's a little bit further into the water, but that isn't accurately representing what the shoreline behind it is. So we're looking at what is the shoreline behind the structures and what is its composition rather than function. And Andrew touched on this previously, but we didn't incorporate the VIMS point structures just because there were a couple that were missing. We weren't quite sure on what their methodology for that was. And essentially, these are some categories that they had, which were wharfs, marinas, jetties, seawalls. We changed these to fit all of our new categories. So a seawall, a jetty, those might fall under bulkhead or riprap, just depending on their actual composition. Something else we did was, that was really important, was to actually consider the adjacent shoreline types. Keep in mind what is next to the shoreline that you're looking at right now. It provides some really useful hints for maybe if you can't tell what something is, look next to it and look at what VIMS had categorized it as well. And we were trying to keep it on a parcel scale. So not looking at it too big, but getting enough detail that it was streamlined and we weren't getting too nitty-gritty with it. And as well, we also started to consider land use later on. And that's where you can see in the non-natural categories where we have residential and ag, stuff like that, is where we incorporated the land use. And these are the 9 codes that we ended up establishing. So we had bulkhead, riprap, 3 natural categories and 4 non-natural categories.
Oops, sorry.
It's fine.
Trying to advance it.
Oh, and then something I forgot to mention on the last slide was we established what we were calling the 30-meter rule. And this is essentially, we needed to decide how far inland from the water's edge we wanted to look. We considered a few different distances, and this is just an example showing you what those distances look like. And we ended up going with the 30 meters because when you look at this at 10 meters, you might say, well, that's all wooded. But something that Megan pointed out that was really helpful to me was, this kind of just looks like maybe someone's backyard that has some trees in it. It's not a fully encompassed wooded area. It's not a large tract of wooded land. So this is something that we categorized as residential because when you move further inland, it turns to non-natural, really. And this is the original, this is just a section of Indian River of the original VIMS assessment. The green is what they established as, I think, natural, or maybe they left it unclassified. Again, there was a little confusion as to that methodology there, but
yeah, I think it was mostly unclassified. They really
yeah, I think a lot of it was unclassified, but the green was also representative of some natural as well. So this is the initial VIMS assessment with the 2012 aerials. And then moving forward, what we did was we established those 9 categories and took the VIMS categories, kind of went around and looked at the shoreline ourselves and decided what the shoreline types were. And this is just a screenshot of the same area of what we classified the shoreline as there. And then the next step was to update this, which is our new 2012 layers.
Is this the right one or did it not?
Yeah, no, this is the right one. Thanks. So this is the same image that you saw on the last slide. And then next is what we did was, update it to the 2022 aerials, going back in, looking at those same areas, and there really wasn't a ton of change. So that's what you're seeing, but that's just an example screenshot of a portion of it. And now we're getting into our category descriptions. These are the 9 classes that I had showed previously, and just describing what we were considering them as. So bulkhead, we kind of found ourselves incorporating things that might not have been technically bulkhead, but were similar enough that we would call it bulkhead. And for example, that could include, you know, what was previously considered marinas, seawalls, etc. And then our second category, riprap, is pretty straightforward. It's really just riprap, but that could be something that might have been categorized by VIMS as a jetty. Well, if it's made of riprap, we're saying it's riprap in our assessment. The natural ones are rather straightforward again. Natural wetland is any larger section of wetland or wetland fringe. Natural wooded, again, like a larger section, like we saw in the previous slide with the residential. We weren't considering that wooded. That would have been residential. And then natural mixed, we were saying, was any combination of these natural types, including sandy beach or scrub shrub, if it was natural and not obviously made non-natural by something. And this could also include any minimal amount of man-made materials. There were some instances where we saw a lot of trash along the shoreline, but it wasn't constituting the entire shoreline. So we were still considering it natural if that was the situation. One example of this was the poplar thicket, the Oki Memorial Wildlife Preserve. There's a stabilization project that looked like it was attempted, maybe not successful, and you can see you know, a lot of the tires in the water. It's man-made material, but it's not constituting the entirety of the shoreline. Behind those tires is what the shoreline really is. And then non-natural agriculture is just ag, any farmland or agricultural land. This is you know, there's a lot more of it in Little Aswan than there was in Indian River. Non-natural residential is the example I showed previously. So any neighborhoods or homes that were not categorized as riprap or bulkhead. And I'll explain that methodology a little bit in the next couple of slides as well. And then we have non-natural transportation, which we were considering roadways, parking lots, or vehicle bridges, again, not already categorized as bulkhead or riprap. And non-natural other might be commercial or industrial sites as well. So this is kind of our flow chart for the categorization process. You know, we start with the question, is it hardened? If yes, then you're going to put it into something that's either bulkhead or riprap. If it's not hardened, or maybe we're unsure, which was a big issue as well. You know, maybe it kind of looked like bulkhead or riprap, but we couldn't be sure without, you know, ground truthing, which we unfortunately weren't able to do at this moment. You'd go next into, well, is it natural or is it non-natural? If it's natural, you group it into one of the 3 categories, natural, wetland, wooded, or mixed. If it's non-natural, it's going into the categories other, ag, residential, or transportation. And this is an example of our categorization process. So this is a residential area. However, there's riprap lining that shoreline. If that riprap weren't there, if there weren't any artificial structures there, we would probably say it was non-natural residential, but likely there would need to be some kind of erosion control structure there. And this is the reference grid we use to keep track of our progress. Andrew came up with this. It's been really helpful. So the yellow-green color is grids marked as complete, and we have complete for 2012 categories and for 2022 as well. The transparent is not complete, and the purple is needs review. So we were able to mark any sections that we needed to go back and look at, maybe with a fresh set of eyes or a different pair of eyes. So that was really helpful in kind of assessing those review areas. And I'm just going to talk about next some actual examples to give you guys a picture of what it looks like in GIS with these 2022 aerials. So this is just an example of bulkhead and riprap. Bulkhead is on the left, riprap's on the right. Again, it looks like residential behind that, but what we were more interested in is if it was artificial there or not. This is an example of a natural area, so you can see the transition from wetland to wooded. There might be some sandy beach type material or a little bit of wetland fringe along the wooded area, but it is a large area of woods, so we consider that predominantly wooded, and that's what we classified it as. And you can see the marsh as well there. This is our example of natural mixed. So you can see there's a little bit of scrub shrub, there's some sand in there. So this is just what we would categorize as a mixed, anything that's a conglomeration of any natural types. And this is our example of non-natural or residential. So you can see there aren't really any erosion control structures there on the left. Or if there were, it's difficult to tell because maybe there wasn't an erosion control structure or an artificial structure adjacent to it, or maybe it wasn't categorized as that in the initial VIMS study. And then the non-natural other, which is the darker red, is actually the yacht club. So that's not technically residential, so we grouped it as other. And then this is obviously an agricultural field. So this is an example from Little Asselman that we would call ag. And again, looking at 30 meters in from the water's edge is what we're trying to focus on. And it's all agriculture. A lot of what we saw too for some of the newer residential developments and any agriculture was a lot of it was further inland than the 30 meters that we were looking at. So we really didn't get a lot of ag right up on the shoreline. And then our last example is our transportation example, non-natural transportation. It looks like there might be riprap under there, but we're not entirely sure. So for now, we're categorizing it as transportation because this is a vehicle bridge. And it's more than likely that there's something artificial under there. And then Andrew's going to take us into the next section, which is the results.
Thank you. So these are preliminary results. And, most of the work was really working with the center and then Lydia just working on her own. And I'll add also learning quite a bit about GIS, I think, in the process. So that was another benefit and also, but a challenge as well, because it was a lot of new tools and techniques for her. We're very lucky to have Lydia working on this. So there's a 4 category system that we work to look at when we're summarizing the information, because there could be some confusion between 2 types. So it's not necessarily wrong, but we wanted to back it up, make it a little more, again, not function related, but condition related. So we divided it into 4 condition type categories. And then we summarized the total length by bay for each of the years, and then used an aggregation grid, which, if you remember the RARE grant from, I guess it's 2009 now, we used that to aggregate the changes on all the marsh conditions, if you remember that study. So this is a quick view of the categories, the more detailed categories on the left, and then the 4 categories. Agriculture is its own category in this sense. It's definitely the smallest and kind of the least, certainly not much change there, but I think because of the difference, you can't really call it non-natural. I mean, it is non-natural, but it's not the same category as a house where you're not, there's no room for transgression of the shoreline or any sort of resilience. This is just a screenshot of red and green indicating natural and non-natural respectively. And ag is not indicated in this. It's lumped into the non-natural. There's really not a lot in there. So it's probably not an issue, but this gets you, not surprising, this gets you a sense of where the natural features along the shoreline are. And then this is the 2012. You can't really see the difference. There are differences, but as we've found, especially in Little Asselman Bay, there's not a lot of changes. It's either been protected or it's already been developed. This is the statistics for it. The table shows the 4 categories by year. Just to point out, it's a 0.5% change in natural shoreline going from something that was natural to that was either artificial or, well, in this case, it was non-natural, so it wasn't artificial. Artificial riprap, bulkheading, hardening, shoreline hardening was very small, essentially non-existent over that 10 years. So that all of the change occurred from the non-natural, non-hardened to the natural, I mean, from the natural to the non-natural, non-hardened, of a total of about 117 miles of shoreline. And this just shows the change, and you can see it's just really, it's negligible, no change in agriculture. Really all the change was in that natural to non-natural. This is the Inland Bay, 2012, the same picture, red and green, and then 2022. And the summary, it was a little more loss, about percentage-wise, about twice the amount of loss that was seen in Little Assateague. Probably not surprising. A lot of changes. We might expect that Rehoboth Bay is going to have similar, if not even slightly higher, percentage changes in the 10-year period. There is also an increase of over 1.25 miles of, which is the largest increase in non-natural or hardened. So 1.25 miles of additional hardening over that period, which to me sounded possibly significant. 142 total miles. So a slightly bigger drop and a slightly different change in the character. It's not going to a non-natural that's not hardened. It's going to hardening. It's riprap or a lot of bulkheading. This is the aggregation grid, which you may look familiar if you remember the earlier studies. It's a way to quantify on a spatial basis the changes, and so you can figure out where the changes are actually occurring within the watersheds. And this is an example of an area that did change between 2012. I think this is in Little Assateague. That was a natural mixed. You can see that there may be some development. I don't know if that pathway in there is indicating that this is not a natural area that's in for the long haul. And within 10 years, it's indeed changed, and now it's non-natural, not hardened. But this is the grid overlaid. So this grid system is much finer than the kind of grid that Lydia showed earlier. This is the aggregation or the quantifying grid that we used. So the red means a change towards a non-natural. And this is the same kind of grid without the lines, but showing areas within Little Assateague in that 10-year period between 2012 and 2022 that did change, mostly red. And this is Indian River Bay, the same concept. So it kind of helps show where possibly some of the changes are. Certainly if we look at land use plus projects, anything on the horizon in terms of development, those are going to be, I think mostly, or they're going to be coming inland on some of the tributaries. So that would be something else that could be incorporated in this to sort of plan where these impacts might be occurring or expected to occur. So possible enhancements is obviously land use is a big deal. Interior land use, and if you build, it's less likely that you have much resilience or much potential if the sea level rise or inundation or any kind of shoreline loss occurs. Elevations were an issue that they looked at. There are tools that I would recommend more than using videography. That is, we found some issues like, I'm not sure, the heights were as accurate, but we have LIDAR from 2014, which they didn't have the benefit of then through the Sandy funding. And we are getting new LIDAR now from hopefully soon that will cover the entire state, including the inland bays. So that might be an interesting thing and it's the tool that could be used for that specific aspect of like how high things are in terms of sediment flux and filling in some of those marsh open pooling areas and so forth. Structures We didn't, but that could be something that would be of interest, where the hardened structures are occurring, as it all relates to resilience. So this is Little Asswoman. You probably recognize that. This is a LiDAR, very high resolution, could be used, for instance, mapping the inland or the interstitial pooling within the wetlands. Everything's been ditched. And there was some presentations at the wetlands conference about these, they call them mega pools, and how to kind of combat some of these. And certainly the LiDAR can be a tool to help inventory and possibly map the change that's easy, that's, I would say, more accurate or more easy to use than aerial photography, which can be confusing to see what it is. This is this is the James Farm area, and we do have, there's a lot of data. There's point clouds, so you can use things like a point cloud to help map biomass. So you can look at some of the ponding issues through the point cloud, because it isn't only the ground, it also looks at first returns, and so this would be a way to do bulk densities of housing and what's in the way. So some of these tools might be worth thinking about as we go forward, but that's sort of where we are, is trying to figure out how this is going to be helpful for STAC and for inland bays in particular. So I'll hand it back to Lydia to wrap up.
Thanks. So we kind of wanted to open the floor for some discussion about future direction. Like Andrew was saying, we're looking for feedback on how this could be useful. So one thing is, this is in support of the Living Shoreline Initiative. How does this study and/or VIMS relate to that initiative? How can this be used to support the initiative? I feel like there's a lot of things that we can do with this, and it would be really great to kind of narrow down those interests. Like data applicability and planning efforts. Andrew mentioned CCMP. Could this be helpful to the overall management plan framework? And does it relate to other areas like water quality, buffer work? And lastly, we're interested in some recommendations from you guys. And potentially, if anyone's interested, we might be able to send out a Google poll if anyone wanted to take that and provide feedback that way. That would be great as well. Or if you wanted to just reach out to, CIB or myself or Andrew as well. But yeah, if anyone has any comments right now, that'd be great.
I'm gonna just
Would you
leave
like
this
me to
slide up
stop
for a
sharing,
minute.
Jen, or should I?
I was gonna say, you might want to just leave the slide up for
Okay.
a minute and just see if anybody has, or maybe we could even put some of those questions into the chat too, and see if folks have anything they want to respond to right now. So Doug, I see your hands up. Oh, we're not hearing you yet. Maybe I do need to see the people.
And it might be future, a future
Okay.
thing.
There we are.
Yeah, I mean, this is really good baseline data, which is really needed, because you really can't assess vulnerability within inland bays without this type of information to start with. And I think that once we have, now we can say, okay, which areas are healthy, which areas are not healthy, which is the buffer thick enough, is it not thick enough? I mean, this is the stuff that we need to find out, so we can do prioritization and strategic planning for the inland bays for the far as the shoreline goes. So if you don't have this information, you really can't have a good start. So this is really useful.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks.
And I
Yeah,
see
I
Meg
think
can
this
drop
is-
in the questions into the chat for us.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Yeah, I agree. This is definitely like a good foundational thing for us. And VIMS really laid the foundation and did that groundwork.
So, my eye was on the ag sector. And so it seemed, especially, I guess, in the Rehoboth area, Rehoboth Bay, no change in the shoreline, but you were really looking at that 30 meters, right? From the edge in. And so what had been ag and stayed ag still had that same amount of shoreline. I have a colleague who's looking at, salinization of ag lands, and I'm I'm curious, you were kind of talking about quality too. I'm wondering if along those areas, if it's still non-natural, or maybe you had sort of like a little bit of a buffer fringe, but then ag behind it, if there is, the trees are dying because of changes in the salinization, because it's moving inland through the groundwater too. And it's probably more than what your work was looking at, but I'm wondering if those are ways to kind of tie some of this data into some other work that's being done, other research.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think it'd be great to get down into those areas in person, and look at it, how, have someone that's interested in doing that.
Yeah, we were struggling sort of even from the beginning, and Andrew initially, and I think Megan feels a little bit of it too. It's like, okay, this is great, but how is it going to fit in? And to me, if its value is that it can fit in somewhere as informing, in the original document, it talks about the Living Shoreline Initiative, and maybe it's that, maybe it's beyond that. But as Doug said, I think having a baseline for understanding this stuff at least is an important start. If you don't know what you have, it's hard to know what you're losing or what's at threat.
We did a similar study along S1 corridor a number of years ago, and we incorporate this type of information into the FEMA flood models to see, okay, what do we have out there? How does that correlate with a flooding condition along us? We focus on S1 corridor, between Rehoboth and the state line. But the big deal here is that, again, we identify how we're going to use this information. What are we trying to figure out? And also, the objective is, are we looking at 50 years down the road with climate change and with a certain storm event? So the next step needs to define the criteria that we are interested in. That will direct us on how we do this.
Christoph.
Yeah, I think all the points are very well taken. I noticed in notes, for example, or comments that Ashley has suggested this is potentially useful for marsh migration purposes. Taking a 30,000 foot view and just thinking about our perspective, certainly mine, and the year that I've been here, what we're wrestling with really is an existential question for a watershed. We're the lowest lying portion of the lowest lying state in the country. And so, coming to grips with a whole bunch of these questions that this kind of analysis is so helpful with is, where are our vulnerabilities? What is vulnerable? Who is vulnerable? What are the economic implications of that vulnerability? And of course, on the flip side, what do we do about it? So, for example, this is hugely helpful for living shoreline purposes, hugely helpful, especially with maybe the adding of additional data layers like LiDAR to help us understand where it is best to restore, where it might be best to let go. And with our habitat plan in the works, what are the implications for habitat? What are the critters that are affected? How do we best provide for their futures? So I just see, I see this going on and on and on and on. The shoreline bit, though, is really important, because what this does is gives us a peak and the ability then to maybe incorporate some of that modeling work that FEMA and DEMA have to do, that NOAA has done through the years, of where are we going with sea level rise, to know, okay, well, there goes that bulkhead system, or there's a shoreline that can migrate. I'm afraid in our watershed, those opportunities are few and far between, but getting to then some really fundamental future questions. What do we do in that changed future when those developments aren't there, when people aren't living there because they can't? And what does that mean then for where marshes can go, where this watershed will evolve to? And I think we need to start thinking about those questions, like what happens when these artificial shorelines aren't there anymore? In other words, we've got a whole new shoreline system that may be on 4th Street in that shoreside development, and give us really a solid framework for anticipating the questions of 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. And begin that process now, because from a behavioral point of view, that this is not too soon to start having conversations with people about what are your options, what's your plan B? Because that could be necessary next week after the next nor'easter comes through, or it could be 5, 10, 20 years from now as sea level rise catches up with all of us. And my sense is that that's baked in. So whatever we do in terms of greenhouse gas emissions in the near term is not going to solve this problem for us, so that we really do have to be planning for the impacts that are already built into the system we'll have to live with for the next millennium.
Yeah, so it really ties into what was being discussed before on behavioral economics. You know, how this is not going to be, you know, popular. It's not going to be easy, but it's also not going to be, it's inevitable that something's going to have to happen. So how to help change people's behavior. Kelly's on it. Angela's on it. We have the STAR team up at EPA, and then the folks down in the inland bays and the other estuary programs. So yeah, I don't know the answer, but it is a challenge.
So I'm just going to call attention to a couple of the comments in the chat too. So Ashley Norden, Christoph mentioned this as well. This data set could help inform marsh migration corridors. And Brianna added, this data can help during the field verification stage of the habitat plan and provide deeper insight into the vulnerable shorelines and areas that are identified in the plan. So I definitely see this as being helpful. So Andrew and Lydia, what do you expect the final work products to be of this effort? Is it going to result in a report? Will the data, the GIS layers be available and shared through maybe the Delaware Geographic Data Committee, if that still exists? What's next?
I can respond. We don't know exactly, because we've sort of felt this out as we went along, because I think early on it was like there was all this great information from VIMS, and how do we make it useful and relevant for today? But yes, I think there's a report that's part of the in the proposal or the scope of work, and also obviously the data is going to be available. I think, to me, that's why it's more of a conversation between the center, the STAC, and us, and anybody else that might have an interest, any stakeholders. So, you know, to me, this is not the turnkey thing where we present it. It's more of like, this is a conversation starter, as well as data that can help guide some decision making, or maybe shed some light in small ways, you know, because we know all this. This is not like surprising results, but it's like, okay, but yes, this is happening, and here's where it's happening, and here's where it's not happening. And yeah, so yes,
I definitely think the larger research community would be interested in this data set. So yeah,
this is sort
certainly
of,
we can give, you know, when we release, well, we're not holding anything from the center, but you know, when they get the data and can do with it, Megan could do what she sees fit, or Christoph, or
now
And
this
Megan
looks
just
like
said,
the scientific version of a living document, and that's what I like about it. I mean, it's a great conversation starter, as you mentioned, Andrew. It's a great base from which to think about what those next steps are, based on, you know, how we need to proceed collectively to help the base.
and
And
maybe
back to
help
the,
people see from a watershed
sorry,
wide
Andrew.
perspective. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I was just going to say really quick, Megan plugged in the chat, kind of back to that sharing aspect, as she said, with the new CIB website, they can share GIS and accommodate GIS in ways that they previously couldn't. So that'll be nice to see as well.
And with the new position, yeah.
wonderful. Are there any other comments or questions for Andrew and Lydia? Exciting work, and you can hear people are excited about it and see the usefulness and feasibility of it. So
Well, thank you for letting us present.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Good luck on finishing up. Okay, so we'll go ahead and transition to our next presentation. This is going to be about marsh and waterbird monitoring efforts in the inland bays. And our presenters are both from the Delaware Division of Fish and Wildlife. Aaron Rogers and Kat Christie, the Species Conservation and Research Program. So Aaron and Kat, I'll turn things over to you. Is Kat here? Or is it just Aaron?
No, Kat is here too.
I'm here also. Hi.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Kat. Nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you as well. And I think Kat is going to be sharing the screen. Yes. There we go. Can
Right,
everyone see that?
It looks great.
Awesome. I'll introduce myself. I'm Erin Rogers. I'm the marsh bird biologist for DNREC's Division of Fish and Wildlife. Kat, did you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kat Christie. I'm the coastal waterbird biologist with Fish and Wildlife.
Awesome. And Kat, I'll just kind of tell you when to advance the slides. But yeah, Kat and I are kind of co-presenting today. And we're going to be talking about marsh bird and water bird monitoring efforts that DNREC Division of Fish and Wildlife is working on in the inland bays. So Kat, you can go for it. Oh, 1 second. One slide back. There we go. All right, so just to give you a general overview, like I said, Kat and I are kind of co-presenting. So I'm going to kick us off with the first section about marsh bird monitoring. And then Kat will lead us through the second section about colonial water birds. And then if there's any time at the end, we're happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So next slide. Yeah, so as I'm sure most of you guys are aware in this group, salt marsh habitat has been experiencing a lot of loss and degradation throughout the Atlantic coast, but also specifically in Delaware and the inland bays. We're seeing problems from coastal sea level rise and storms. We're seeing a lot of problems with excessive pooling, the die-off of vegetation, and some problems with invasive species like Phragmites. And then we're also seeing a lot of effects of past and present human alterations on the marshes from things like ditching, tidal restrictions, man-made barriers to marsh migration, and then shoreline hardening, kind of like what the last presentation was just discussing. And because of those, habitat problems and sea level rise, marsh birds are really starting to suffer as well, because these birds really depend on the salt marshes for the entirety of their life cycle. And I've listed a couple really important examples here, one of which is the salt marsh sparrow, which is experiencing some of the worst declines of all the marsh birds at an estimated 9% per year. And they are estimated to go extinct by about 2050 if no action is taken. Another example is the northern clapper rail that we have around here is exhibiting declines at an estimated 4.5% per year. And those are just two examples. There's a lot of other marsh bird species that are believed to be declining as well. And so why do we care about monitoring these birds? We really need to understand their kind of occupancy, abundance, and trends over time, especially because these birds can really serve as indicator species for the health of our marshes. And by understanding their kind of abundance and their trends, we can contribute to state level and region-wide management and conservation strategies. And it can also really help us provide insight for salt marsh restoration projects that happen in the future. Another thing that we can contribute to through marsh bird monitoring is enacting the Salt Marsh Sparrow Conservation Plan, which was published in 2020 by the Atlantic Coast Joint Venture, or the ACJV. And that plan calls for state level surveys to be performed every 2 to 3 years to really be able to detect meaningful changes in salt marsh sparrow populations, as well as other marsh bird populations. And so that leads us into, thank you, Kat. That leads us into kind of our methods for how we monitor marsh birds. And we do this through point counts, but they're not really typical point counts that a lot of other programs use for other types of birds. And this is because a lot of marsh birds are pretty secretive. So they kind of run around in the grasses, they fly low, and if they do pop up, they pop up for a pretty short amount of time before kind of plopping back into the grass. And a lot of times you're going to hear them rather than see them. And so a lot of their characteristics make them really challenging to detect using a lot of more traditional methods and more traditional point count methodologies. So fortunately, there is a monitoring protocol that is specifically designed to address challenges related to marsh birds and their life habits. And this is called the North American Marsh Bird Monitoring Protocol. And this is the protocol that we use. It's also the protocol that the Salt Marsh Habitat and Avian Research Program, or SHARP, uses throughout the East Coast from Maine to Virginia. So what this protocol entails is 2 to 3 visits per survey point per season. And the reason that we visit points multiple times is to increase our chances of detecting these birds because they're so secretive. You may visit the point one time and the bird may not be vocalizing and it might be hiding in the grass. It could be there and you don't even know it. So by doing this multiple times, you're increasing the probability you're going to see it or hear it. And then we perform these surveys from May 1st to July 25th or July